To the room and grabbed a seat here, acting like he was a member of the union. And
wishful thinking.
you want to go back, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. We have been joined by the Executive Director of the Democratic National Committee. Patrick Gaspard. They gave me a list of the things he did, you know, and I'm trying to remember them all. But among the things he worked on was the 1988 campaign for Jesse Jackson for president. He then went on to work in New York on a mayoral campaign. He also, we can talk about that.
We can talk about that.
But Patrick also, how many people in here have ever had an idea we should have like an independent labor party? Well, he tried that too. There was a little experiment in the 90s called the New Party, and Patrick worked on that as well. But in 2008, he had been executive super senior vice president of, I forget the title, Patrick. Patrick was an executive vice president of 1199, the Hospital Workers in New York. It's the largest local union in America, 300,000 members in the local. And Patrick was the political director there for years. And he went on in 2008 to work in the Obama campaign. And all of those crazy things that Obama did that united so many people across the country, Patrick was right there and involved in it. He went on to become the White House political director, and he served in that role until
March
of last year, when he moved over to the Democratic National Committee, and he is now the executive director of the committee. And he is here today to talk to us not only about the race for the White House, but also taking a Democratic majority in the Congress and in the Senate. As I said, he worked in a mayoral campaign in 1989 in New York. I worked there with him. We handed out leaflets on street corners together, and we've been friends ever since. So please give an ATU welcome to Patrick Gaspard.
Good morning, ATU. Good morning. I have to be completely honest with you. This is a little emotional for me because Larry's not just another labor leader in America for me. He's a dear friend, and in many regards, he's a mentor and somebody who was a protector. I first got my toes wet, dipped my toes into electoral politics in 1988 on the Jackson campaign. I had been involved in progressive organizing for ever since I was a kid. My family comes from Haiti. When we came to this country, we were fleeing a dictatorship in the Caribbean, arrived here, and my parents always instilled in us a sense that we had to be engaged in civic activity, we had to give back to the community, and we had to find some way to give collective expression to all of our personal political aspirations. So I had always been involved, but I was always cynical about politicians and electoral politics. I still am, truth be told. But I got involved in the Jackson movement in '88, and that enabled me to meet some really amazing leaders in New York. And then eventually, in 1989, I was a kid on the Dinkins campaign. Somehow or another, I'm not quite sure how. First we defeated Ed Koch, and then we defeated Rudy Giuliani. I met Larry in that campaign. He gave us all kinds of spirited advice and help. And you should understand what New York was like in that period. In 1989, David Dinkins was running to become the first African-American mayor of New York, and Larry was a leader in Staten Island. Staten Island was a county in New York that was threatening secession for a whole host of reasons, not the least of which they weren't entirely pleased with the guy who had just become mayor of the city for a whole host of complicated reasons. For a whole host of complicated reasons. Larry, when we walked into City Hall in January of 1990, said something that stayed with me at the time and proved to be absolutely spot on correct. Larry, you probably don't even remember this, but in a meeting with other labor leaders in the city at the time, Dennis Rivera, the guys from DC 37, CWA, you sat in a conversation and you said, we all have to make sure that we don't just walk away from the table now that we elected David Dinkins. We need to keep this coalition together. We need to make sure that we're giving him the resources that he needs to push his agenda, and we need to hold him accountable on the things he said he would do during the campaign. Well, I'm chagrined to say that the folks around the table all nodded yes, but actually didn't take Larry's advice that day. Folks went off into their separate silos, started just kind of appealing to the administration on their own narrow parochial needs, and never sustained the movement that got us into office in the first place. Ended up being a one-term mayoralty, which ushered in the horror that was Rudy Giuliani, and the lesson that Larry tried to impart on leadership that day always stuck with me in every iteration of my political existence since. And I think that there are some sharp parallels between the coalition that we had in 1989 that elected Dinkins in the city of New York and the amazing coalition and movement that came together in 2007 and 2008 to elect a skinny, unknown senator from Illinois with a pretty funny name into the White House. There are sharp parallels because you all remember, of course, the summer of the Tea Parties and all of the right-wing angst we've seen and the mobilization from that side. It took a good 2.5 years before we saw anything that even resembled collective action and movement from the progressive community on the issues that are near and dear to all of us and the economic disparities that continue to be driven across this country. So I'm saying all of that to say that Larry is not only somebody who's a dear friend, a trusted friend, but somebody who had the right kind of counsel and wisdom for that age, and someone who continues to be ahead of the curve. The evidence of Larry being ahead of the curve is what I've been reading about in all of your publications, the quotes I've been seeing from Larry in the newspapers about how organized labor needs to move away from a model where you guys are just ATMs for the Democratic Party or for any elected officials, and you need to go out there and build your own infrastructure in state after state on the ground to make sure that you're pushing your issues and getting elevation and going way beyond issues that people traditionally associate with transit workers. So I think it's altogether right and appropriate that I'm coming to have a conversation with you all right now about the political landscape that we find ourselves in and the organizing opportunities that are crystal clear and are in front of us. But first, I really have to acknowledge what happened last night. I don't know about you all, but I was pretty damn entertained. I think it's pretty remarkable that after running for president for about a decade and expending tens of millions of dollars of his own resources, his Wall Street friends, and his super PAC friends, that Mitt Romney is struggling against the likes of Rick Santorum? I mean, really? I mean, have you all met Rick Santorum? It's a pretty remarkable phenomena. And I think that it speaks to the fact that this guy just lacks any kind of a core, and all of the enthusiasm that you all had been hearing about in the Republican base over the course of the last few years is abating, and there's this counter-narrative and counter-movement that's really starting to get some wind in its sails right now. But make no mistake, irrespective of what happened last night, and despite the fact that the entire Republican contest looks like a circus car being driven by Donald Trump, and one clown after another keeps piling out of that vehicle, despite all of that, as I said to the president in a meeting last week, when he said to me, Patrick, can you kind of assess for me where the opposition is right now? And I said, sir, the opposition sucks, but they can still beat you. They can beat you because, of course, we all know that we've got a tough economic climate. There are still some tough headwinds, despite the fact that unemployment is moving in the right direction. We have some stubborn metrics from foreclosures, and, of course, you all know what's happening with gasoline prices right now. And as I reminded the president, at the height of our popularity, when we had 13 million Americans, Larry, giving some measure of themselves in that last campaign, knocking on doors, registering voters, getting out the word about what Barack Obama's vision for America was. Despite all of that, John McCain and Sarah Palin still got 47% of the vote against us in 2008. And in this environment, going from 47 to 50+1 ain't that hard. Fortunately for us, I still think that we have an amazing candidate on our side. Our guy's going to be a remarkable standard bearer. And as the president always says to me and Axelrod and to Messina, the other side sometimes forgets that he's got skills. And when he's out there and he's campaigning and he's having the conversation and driving the sharp contrast, I think more likely than not, he's going to manage to communicate a message that resonates with your activists and with Americans across the country. I'm also, of course, encouraged that we actually have accomplished a number of things with your help that we're rightly proud of. I remember that cold January day back in 2009 when Barack Obama took the oath of office, and there was all this swirl of energy and this sense of hopefulness that existed in this country. And the president was very sober and very measured in the address that he gave on the steps of the Capitol that day. And he made it abundantly clear that he did not believe that he won the presidency on the strength of his own charms, which I think are considerable, but that there were lots of folks who worked incredibly hard to get him there, and that he could not govern on his own either, and that the challenges that we were faced with were so tremendous and had not been seen in 70 years in this country that we were all going to have to get in the same boat and put our oars in the water at the same time. Well, right after that address, I walked into the White House with the president as part of the senior staff, and we went into our first briefing in the Situation Room, and of course discovered that the economic crisis was a good deal worse than had been previously advertised to us, that unemployment was going to continue to go up towards 10%, and that it was going to take a while to bring it down. We also discovered that the foreclosure crisis, again, steeper than we understood, and we discovered that Barack Obama was going to have to become the CEO of the American automobile industry. So all of that was unexpected, and in the midst of it all, the president looked at all of us and said, you know what, I know this is tough, but there are a number of things that we ran on that we said we would do, and I'm going to go after them anyway. We're going to go and we're going to draw down our troops in Iraq, despite what the National Security Staff is telling me. We're going to bring Afghanistan to a responsible end as well. And in the midst of all that, we're going to go out and we're going to try to get universal health care passed in this country as well. And I remember Axelrod and I looked at him because we had seen the polling on all this stuff. We're looking at him like he's got three heads. And he said, look, I know that you all think that this is not the politically expedient path to go on, but a guy named Barack Hussein Obama was never supposed to be elected to the White House in the first place, so why don't we just kind of like throw our dice on the table and let's see if we can do things, not just for the moment, but for the next generation of Americans. So of course, we inherited an economy where we were bleeding 750,000 jobs per month, had lost 8 million jobs after the collapse in September of 2008, and before our Recovery Act took hold. From the moment recovery took hold to now, we have grown close to 4 million jobs in the last 24 months in the private sector, which for me looks like change that I can believe in. I also know that for me, change I can believe in looks like a president who, when he walks through the door, says, you know what, we're not giving up on American manufacturing. You all remember when not only Republican presidents, but even Democratic presidents like our dear friend Bill Clinton told us that the jobs that had gone off overseas, the good manufacturing jobs, were never coming back. Well, in our first budget, the president invested in American manufacturing. We did it again in our second budget, despite the resistance of blue dog Democrats, right? It wasn't just Republicans who were against all these things. Let's all remember that when we talk about accountability. We resisted their objections. President doubled down on manufacturing, and over the last 2 years, we've now grown manufacturing in this country close to 13%. 400,000 new manufacturing jobs exist now that existed when we walked into the White House. Don't know about you, but that's kind of change that I can believe in, and I certainly know that change I can believe in is a president who stares down Republican opposition, again, stares down Democrats as well, looks at public opinion polls that says that Americans actually don't want the federal government to intervene in the crisis in the automobile industry, but the president invests on American workers, lays his bet with American workers. He bails out the automobile industry, but does it in a way where he brings the UAW and management to the same table to just compromise on responsible solutions. And as a result of that, despite the fact that folks like Mitt Romney were saying, let Detroit go bankrupt, we've now restored the iconic automobile industry so that GM is making more profit than it ever has before. They've rehired 200,000 auto workers that were laid off during the downturn, and they saved 1.4 million jobs in states like Michigan and Ohio and Wisconsin and Indiana, all up and down the supply chain. Again, don't know about the rest of America, but for me, that looks like change that I can believe in. I can remember I remember when we lost Ted Kennedy's seat in Massachusetts, and a whole lot of people in the White House, who will go unmentioned, right, I think Larry knows who I'm talking about, came into the Oval Office and they said to the president, you know what, we've lost Ted Kennedy's seat, the nation is against us on healthcare reform, let's go out and figure out some small bore things that we can do and just claim moral victory and move on. And the president said to all of us as a senior team, I actually don't really care if I'm a one-term president. We said we'd get health care done. There are 47 million Americans right now who have insufficient coverage. There are millions of children who have absolutely no care at all. There are senior citizens who are falling victim to the donut hole. I'm going to make sure we do something about it. So he went off, pushed us all, got health care done, and as a result, already, from the moment he signed that bill into law into now, 2.5 million young people between the ages of 18 to 26 have health insurance who did not have it before, and we've managed to go a long way towards closing that donut hole and reducing health care disparities. So while that bill continues to be not the most popular bill in this country, I am absolutely assured that a decade from now, 2 decades from now, people are going to look back at that moment and they're going to look at it as one of the most transformative pieces of social legislation that we've ever had in this country, and with your help, we're going to strengthen it moving forward. I also know that for me, change looks like a president and a vice president who during the American Recovery Act, when we were fighting for stimulus, insisted that we move $8 billion in direct resources for transit aid. Because for too long, we had one president after another, one House after another, one Senate body after another, turning away from our urban centers, not making those investments, allowing our infrastructure to just go into blight. We invested $8 billion in that first budget cycle during recovery to getting 10,000 new buses across this country, making sure that our transit hubs were repaired, and saving countless jobs in municipal centers. So again, for me, that's change that I can believe in. I'm not even going to go through the fact that while some folks were demanding that he prove his citizenship, we went out and smoked Osama bin Laden, took care of Muammar Gaddafi, and wiped out the leadership of al-Qaeda. I'm not going to go into the fact that for the first time in the history of this country, irrespective of who you love, you have the ability to serve this country you love because of the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I'm not going to go through the 20 other measures that we took on the environment or all that we've done to make sure that as a consequence of reforms in education, our young people can out-innovate and out-compete with their counterparts anywhere in the world. So I believe that there's a conversation to be had with your activists and with all Americans about what's been done over the course of the last 3 years. But I'm also abundantly clear, as is the president, that we've got a long ways to go, that there's so much that we have not yet accomplished. And if the president were here, I know that he would tell you that he himself is frustrated by the pace of change in this country, and it can't come fast enough. And boy, are we frustrated by the partnership that we have with the Senate and what we've got to deal with in the House of Representatives. If you pay attention to what the president said in his State of the Union address, if you pay attention to the speech that he gave in Osawatomie, Kansas last year, Larry, when he was hearkening back to the progressive politics of Theodore Roosevelt, and if you look at all the ways in which the president messaged when we were in the debt ceiling debate and the payroll tax debate against the Republicans, it should be clear to all of you that we're going to lift up the question of disparities over the course of the next 238 days of this campaign, and we're going to lay very, very sharp contrast with candidates on the other side who are embracing the Ryan budget, who are jeopardizing Social Security and Medicare, and who believe that the only way that we can continue to be prosperous is if we have a race to the bottom, continue to outsource jobs, and cut at the federal, state, and municipal level. And of course, the president also thinks that we just need to inject back into our political conversation the basic American value of fairness, to make it abundantly clear that if you're going to work hard and play by the rules, we're going to elevate you and support you. And if in the other instance you're going to be down in Wall Street or like Mitt Romney, cooking the books so that you can pay 13% in taxes while the rest of us pay 34%, then we're going to do all that we can to level the playing field. It ain't going to be easy. It's going to be a tough contest, but I know, judging by the over 2 million Americans who've already signed up to be active in the campaign this time around, judging by the way in which we have some spread in battleground state after battleground state between ourselves and Romney and Santorum, judging by the enthusiastic endorsement that we just got yesterday when I was down in Orlando with the AFL-CIO, and judging by all I'm seeing from this union and from your brethren, where you are making a sharp turn and going back to the kind of boot on the ground politics that first drew me into your movement. I feel encouraged, and I think that we're going to have enough of a headwind to get this thing done 8 months from now. But again, it won't be easy, and it's all going to be about being active, being mobilized, and animating our core constituency. I'm going to end right now with one little story, because I want to open it up for what I hope is going to be a little bit of a back and forth and a conversation with you guys. I want to end with one quick story from my days back in the day in New York when I first became active in organized labor. I was working, as Larry said, for the Hospital Workers Union. It was before I was an officer in the union, and I was an organizer there. And the then president of the union, a good friend of Larry's, Dennis Rivera, sent me off on a campaign to save a hospital in Brooklyn County, which was really struggling. And there was a local congressman who sat on the board of that community hospital, and our president sent me to go have a conversation with him about all he could do to support our members in this institution and to make sure that Washington, D.C. and Albany were paying attention to the plight of folks who had to use that as their primary care. So I go in, I talk to this congressman, and I'm not going to say his name because, regrettably, he's still in the House of Representatives today, 20 years later. That place has not changed. So I go in to see this guy. I tell him about this institution going belly up and that thousands of his constituents were dependent upon this hospital for their care. He looks at me without even batting a lash. He says to me, there's an event coming up for my reelection a couple of weeks from now, and I wonder if you all would support it. I'm naive, right? So I just keep going on with my rap, and I'm talking about diabetes in this community and asthma rates and all that we got to do to turn that around. He then gets up from his desk, walks across to a table, opens a drawer, and pulls out a piece of paper. He walks it over to me, and he hands me an invitation to a reception. And he says, I wonder if you all can purchase 5 tables to this event. And I'm thinking, what the bleep is going on here? And then he then says to me, I'm in a tough primary this year. I think you guys have like more than 10,000 registered voters in my district. Can I count on you to support my reelection? So it finally dawns on me that he doesn't give a rat's ass about what's happening in this hospital. He cares about his own survival, and the only way I'm going to get through to him is if I speak to him on his terms. So I go back to my union president, and I recount the story to him, and I ask him for permission to go into the hospital and the surrounding hospitals to get organizers to door knock in the community and pull out all of our members to show up at the congressman's doorstep. My president thinks, I don't know if you'll be successful, but it sounds like a decent idea. We go out, we knock on doors. I tell that story, and our folks show up in both his district office, and we do show up to that event that he was asking us to purchase tickets for, but we don't show up at the tables. We show up at the door, and there are 200 of us standing at the door, barring his other guests from coming in. Well, I think you can imagine what took place after that. The guy calls a press conference, he runs up to Albany, he goes to see the governor, he becomes the most progressive standard bearer for urban healthcare that I've ever seen in my life, and of course we managed to save that institution. But of course for me, that was a lesson in what political activity, unfortunately, really needs to look like in this country, because folks who are in these positions are not going to surrender anything unless you've got your heel in their back every single day of the week. So with that, I'd love to open up. I want to thank you all again for everything that you do every single day to keep America moving forward. And I'm going to say that we are going to be more dependent on you now more than ever before to get across the finish line in November. So with that, Larry, if you'll have me a little longer, I'd love to